Power of the institution, the next two movies kind of deal with the power of the institution. In a lot of ways of the government, of politics, that this is where the power lies, and getting a hold of this is the important thing. Milk. Milk is about a character named Harvey Milk. He's a guy in our history. He was a homosexual activist. He was gay in early days when it was even less popular than it is today. And he got involved in the political world to try to change some things and to try to change some laws. I really didn't like this movie, but mostly because it failed to do anything I think it was trying to do. Taking the movie on its own agenda, on its own course, I think it was trying to make Harvey Milk look like a hero, and I think it was trying to make the fight look like a civil rights fight, and I think it was trying to make the victory look significant and substantive, and it didn't do any of these things. In one sense, I give it credit for revealing that Harvey Milk's life was wretched. The man was personally wretched. The movie begins with him picking up a stranger on the street for sex. I don't care if you're homosexual or heterosexual. That's a terrible idea. And a terrible way to live your life. Throughout the course of the movie, you see that the fellowship with which he's a part of, the homosexual community, I didn't write this movie. I didn't script it. The movie, which is, I think, intended to be favorable to the homosexual community, the movie communicates that the only thing holding this community together is sex. I didn't say it. It's the movie did it. So there's the fellowship there that you have there. The Christ figure is Milk. He's the only one, and even here, again, not my words, he's the only one in the community sort of really willing to step out and do something substantive and real, to sort of try to do something political and engage in the real world instead of living in their own little community. So he's the only one who can do it. Substitutionary love, I said we. Frankly, I think it's non-existent. There isn't an example of it in the movie. It's one of the problems in the movie. Redemption, also very weak. It's present for Milk only in that he goes from having totally a wretched personal life and no other life to having totally a wretched personal life and then having a little bit of a political positive life. And so I guess that's from worse to better. There's no resurrection. In fact, the movie is about his assassination. And again, they rightfully portray that his assassination comes about because the guy who killed him was nuts. That's basically the bottom line. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about the Twinkie defense. So it's something we rail against sometimes. It's sort of a weird sort of defense. It's the guy that killed two people, and then he said that it was because he ate a lot of Twinkies and junk food, and that kind of played with his mind. This was the guy that used that defense. The justice comes because it's all about trying to get this one vote passed in San Francisco, and they work hard and hard and hard to get it passed, and they get it passed. Again, leaving political questions aside, the movie totally cuts itself off at the knees because it acknowledges halfway through the movie that two things. One, this vote is not that important. And two, even, as they say right out of the dialogue, even Ronald Reagan is in favor of this law. So this isn't really sort of something that is us against Goliath. It's sort of everybody wants to pass this, except the really fringe people who end up shooting people in the end anyway. So it just is really weak, that's all. And the alternate worlds, again, the movie itself makes a clear line between those who are homosexual and those who are heterosexual. The homosexual world is not one that I would imagine even people today in the homosexual community would like to communicate what they're about. But it's a world that is very depraved in the movie. And it's versus the heterosexual world, which is a very asexual world. We don't have sex, apparently, in the heterosexual world. All right, good. We'll pass that one. Frost Nixon. Fellowship depends on what saving the world means. Remember, the fellowship is about a group of people who come together with unique talents and abilities to save the world. So sometimes when you're trying to figure out who's the fellowship in this movie, it depends on what saving the world is about. Frost Nixon is a movie, I'll say this, I'm not recommending it. I don't recommend any movie from the pulpit. I try not to. I didn't mean to recommend 24, so if you started watching it after I recommended it, I apologize. So, nonetheless, Frost Nixon was the surprise of the movies that I watched. I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would. It was very well crafted, and it was very easy to sort of stop thinking of it as a political movie, which it obviously is, but it was easy to sort of stop thinking of it as a political movie and think of it as Rocky. I already mentioned Rocky, but this movie is Rocky. This movie is about a powerhouse named Nixon who is able to sort of control the way people think about him. And it's about an underdog named David Frost, who's sort of a media almost nobody. And it's about this great battle that they have together in this series of boxing matches, interviews. And the question is, will the underdog win at the end? And the saving of the world seems to be, it's either about the redemption of David Frost, or it's about the healing of a nation by getting Richard Nixon to admit he was wrong. And that's what sort of the key thing is all about. Can we get him to admit he was wrong? What's interesting is if it's about getting Nixon to admit he's wrong, the fellowship is comprised of David Frost and Richard Nixon. Because only Richard Nixon really has the ability to actually admit it. And so he ends up becoming a really important part of this fellowship working together. David Frost has to get him there, Richard Nixon has to do it, and then they have their various people on the sides that are part of this fellowship. Christ figure is either Frost or Nixon. Again, it depends what the point is. If the point is to heal the nation, then actually Richard Nixon, who is not the hero of the movie, is the Christ figure. Because he's the one who has the ability to heal the nation within the context of the movie. You don't have to buy that necessarily. There's really no evidence of substitutionary love. Redemption, Frost and Nixon. David Frost is a struggling media mogul. He has this big interview. He pins everything on this. And the point is, if he can win this battle, then his career will be redeemed. And there's even this huge dialogue between them, which likely never, ever happened. It would be impossible to know, in fact, since it was supposed to have happened on a phone privately. But in the movie, there's this huge dialogue between the two of them, in which Richard Nixon comes out and says, one of us will win and one of us will lose. One of us will rehabilitate their career and the other one will go down in flames. Who's it going to be? It's kind of the trash talking before the boxing match. And so if it's about that, then David Frost is redeemed, but also Nixon's admission of his guilt is portrayed in the movie as a bit of a redemption for him. Certainly not for his career. Resurrection, Frost, not Nixon. Frost wins. There, spoiled the movie for you. But it's like the Titanic, you probably knew. Frost wins. He gets Nixon to admit on TV that mostly to admit that perhaps he was wrong. So, but Frost is resurrected in the course of the movie. In fact, the movie is mostly about Frost's resurrection. Justice, again, Nixon apologizes. That's the whole point. We got to get Nixon to a place where he admits he's wrong. Alternate worlds are interesting. You've actually got three. You've got the world of the media, which is David Frost's world. You've got the world of the politicians, which is Nixon's world. And then you have sort of this implicit world of real life, which is all the rest of us. Watching this big battle between these sort of godlike creatures who are on Mount Olympus, who really have control of the world, wondering who's going to control our destiny from here on out. That's the problem with the movie, is at the end it comes out with the rest of us being subservient to them. And our healing can only be accomplished as they work out the battle.